All right. So I want to do this video. And this is from a Substack that I read and really enjoyed. And Greg Sutter from the Greg Sutter Files, gpsutter at substack.com. I'll put the link to the article in the description. But basically, this is Elmore Leonard's 11 Rules of Writing. So this is from the BoucherCon 2000 Awards Banquet and Dutch. That was what they called Elmore Leonard. Dutch delivers a slightly different set. And so this is pretty cool. So basically, he had to give a speech award at the awards banquet in BoucherCon 2000. He was the guest of honor, and he scribbled away on a yellow pad, and he came up with these rules. He said he felt an obligation to help the many writers and aspiring writers that would be in the audience that night with the distillation of his then half-century of writing experience. Thus was born what was later to be published as Elmore Leonard's 10 Rules of Writing. But that night there were 11. So here we go. So this is what he said. So he says, this is how he starts the speech. He says, 49 years ago, last month, I sold my first story. And since then, I've come up with 10 rules for success and happiness in writing fiction. So, I mean, if you don't know Elmore Leonard, there's something wrong with you. Phenomenal writer, obviously. These are his rules. They all make sense. Number 1, try to leave out the passages that readers tend to skip. It's the ones that you spend the most time on. Again, these are all common sense. These are all words of wisdom. These are all the things as a writer you should know. I've been doing this for nearly 40 years. And that one is still one of those that really still rings true, especially the part that you spend the most time on. It's a struggle, right? As a writer, if you're in the zone and you hit on some pages and you know they're brilliant, those are just so easy to write. So that's a good rule. That's a good rule to have. If you're struggling with a part, maybe it doesn't belong in the book. Number 2, never open a book with weather or linger on descriptions of weather unless you're really good at it. Another great piece of advice. As a writer in my teens, I would always I would have a lot of that. I would always have where they're basically it's raining really bad when they did this or did that. You know, it was snowing really bad outside when this or this. I did a lot of that because I wasn't a good writer, and I just did it basically to pad it a little bit. You know, to basically take the focus from, hey, my characters aren't really that good. Let's move it over here to setting, kind of thing. So that's always a good one. Number 3, never open with a prologue because they're boring. Get into your story as fast as you can. Example, the night Vincent was shot, he saw it coming. That's a perfect way to, you know, what is the old that you start the story 2/3 into the story? I once wrote a book called Toolshed, which is behind me somewhere. It's behind right there. And the first 3 chapters were just basically set up. And the 4th chapter, someone who was a friend of mine who was reading it for me. He said, this is many years ago. He said, the first 3 chapters are garbage. Cut them. And I said, no, you need all the information. He says, you don't need all that information. It's all boring. He says, what you need is chapter 4 starts with the line, the cows had exploded. And the book goes from there. And I was like, you're right. And I ended up using that. Much, much better book. So I do understand. Get rid of the boring parts. Start with something going on. Something that makes you, the night Vincent was shot, he saw it coming. As a reader, what comes next? What else is going to, why did Vincent get himself into such trouble that he was going to get shot? That's the bottom line there. Number 4, never describe the physical look of a character in details that the reader will never remember. They like to picture characters the way they want. 100% agree with that. I will only some characters to differentiate the characters. Maybe she's a blonde or she's a brunette. Maybe if it has to do with the story, he's got a scar, he walks with a limp, any of those things. But you want the reader to own those characters in their head. You want the reader to feel like that could be me, or I see me, or I see someone in this role. Okay, I think that's really, really important. As a reader, when I read stuff, I'm always looking and I'm reading. I'm always like, all right, I'm picturing people in my head, and you're not giving me description of these people. That I'm like, oh, okay, this is the character. Okay, and I don't, as a reader, I don't own that. There's a disconnect there. So that's a great thing. Don't overdo it with the details. Nobody wants to know every single thing about that person. Also, I've read a lot of books where the people look at themselves in the mirror. They wake up. The book starts with them waking up in the morning, and they go to the bathroom and look at themselves in the mirror, and then they describe themselves. Like, don't do that. Don't do that. Number 5, use exclamation marks sparingly. Never in the narrative, and only in dialogue when you can't avoid it. Hey, look out! That kind of stuff. I am not a fan of using exclamation marks in my stories, but I've read a lot of books where people use it. I've also read a lot of books where people overuse it. I read a book maybe a year or so ago, and I actually stopped. I did not finish the book because within the first 2 pages, they had used not even one exclamation mark. They used 2 exclamation marks every time every time they did something. And it was like a car came coming down the road, 2 exclamation marks. Suddenly, he had to jump on the sidewalk, 2 exclamation marks. I'm like, this is like, I don't know, teenage stuff. You shouldn't do that. So that's a good one. I try to never use exclamation marks. That's just me as a writer, and also me as a reader. I'm not a big fan of it. Number 6, never use another verb in place of said, he implored. Why? Because it sounds like writing. I rewrite it. Words can be distracting. Conrad said words can get in the way of the story, but you have to use them. Yeah, so it's said, asked. Although I'm noticing a lot of authors, Elmore Leonard was obviously one that he just said, even if it's a question, have you ever been to that restaurant before? He said, instead of he asked. It doesn't lose anything. I use he asked, but I know a lot of writers. I've seen it in some Gabino Iglesias, a story or two as well. It's even if it's a question, he still asked, she still asked, and it's better than as a kid, when you're a teenager and you're writing your story, it's always the she shrieked, she screamed, she bellowed, on and on, and there's all these verbs that we're using. There's all these other words we're using instead of just said. A good rule is I try not to do said twice in a row. Or asked, where are you going? Bob asked. Brenda just gave him a weird look. I'm going wherever I want to go. So there's not a she said, or nothing. We're breaking it up so there's not just a page of said. That's me. Number 7, never use an adverb to modify said. He said authoritatively. If you have to tell how your character is speaking, you haven't established the character's attitude or personality well enough, which goes back to what I was just saying. We're using verbs and adverbs, and we really just need said. And we also need action there. We need if it's I don't like that person, Bob said. Okay. But if I don't like that person, Bob said, he punched the table, something like that. Okay. We're not modifying like Bob said as he punched the table. You know what I mean? We're doing other things. I don't even know if that even makes sense. We're showing action. We're showing them action. We're showing them doing something that has nothing to do. They're still saying it, but now you get okay. He's mad. Bob is mad. I don't like that person, and Bob. You can tell Bob is mad at that. If that makes any sense. Number 8. Never use a colon or semicolon in dialogues. It may be grammatically correct, but doesn't look right. Jane Langdon and I discussed this the other night, agreeing in the use of colons, semicolons, dashes, ellipses, and italics. Yeah, people aren't talking like that. People aren't talking and using a semicolon as they're talking. I don't know if you've ever had a conversation with any other human being in the world. I don't think they're really talking like that. Although you really can't go by conversations and write them out verbatim, because then a lot of times it's like this. I'm just adding and subtracting, and there's no complete finished sentences. Period. Next sentence. Period. Next sentence. There's a lot of breaks. There's a lot of stuttering. There's a lot of ums. There's a lot of pauses. So you don't want to do all that. You don't want to take the reader out of the story. And I think with, especially with dialogues, you want the dialogue to flow. You want the dialogue to make sense. And you never want to take the reader out where they're, I've read a lot of stuff where they're using accents. And remember, what was it? Andy Capp. You remember that comic strip? Half the time you couldn't understand what Andy Capp was even saying because it was such a thick dialect, the way they were running it. And as a kid, I didn't want to read that because I was like, I don't even know what the heck they're even talking about half the time. So there you go. So then just keep that in mind. Number 9. Tell your editor to tell the copy editor not to mess with your punctuation as long as it's consistent. Incomplete sentences are okay. I agree with this completely. Now we have all of the spell checks, grammar checks, we have all of this, and there's constantly that blue line under everything as we're online typing it. And it's just most of them you ignore because none of them make sense. Okay, because there's a dialogue. People are talking. People are having a conversation. It doesn't have to be grammatically perfect. There's a lot of just random words your characters are throwing in there. There's a lot of sentences you are writing that structurally, maybe they're not all that great. I had an editor that I worked with for many years. And she would, at first, when we first started working together, she was an English major. And she was like, beating up the first couple of books that I sent her. And I was like, no, I'm not writing a textbook. I'm writing fiction. These characters need to talk like this. There's characters that I had written back then I still do, that are from the South. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. And they were saying, I'm telling you. So telling is there's no G at the end. And ya is YA. And she would change to I'm telling you. And I'm like, no, that's not how people talk. So just don't be afraid to have a conversation with them. I've worked with a lot of different editors, a lot of different companies. And I've had where they come back and they're giving me all kinds of commas are all over the place, adding extra comma. I'm like, no. None of these are right. They might grammatically be correct, but they ruin the flow of the story, and you're moving around because the dialogue is the person talking about 3 or 4 different things, and you're screwing that up. If that makes any sense. Number 10. And if you ever work in Hollywood, take the advice of Raymond Chandler, who said, wear your second best suit artistically speaking, and don't take things too much to heart. Do the best you can without straining at it. And when you've had enough, say goodbye with a smile, because for all you know, you may want to go back. I've worked, as you've seen a video before, hopefully, I've worked with a B movie Hollywood company. I think I did 14 books with them. Most of them are ghost written. A few of them have my name on it. And yeah, you don't want to give them your best work, because your best work, hopefully, you want to use for you. And I think that's what I'm reading on that one. You might have, on any of these, you might have a difference of opinion. I'm just telling you, I'm reading them and I'm telling you my opinion on stuff, because the name of this channel is Armand's Opinion. That's my opinion. Number 11, which is 9A. Don't ever write to critics, and don't show your manuscript to anyone outside of the publishing business until you're satisfied with it. And I think that's a great point. Especially new writers, and I did this too. I want everybody to read my book. I want all my friends. I want my family to everyone read my book. Tell me how great I am. Give me some constructive feedback on this book. But it's mostly going to be people that don't read your genre, people that don't read, people that are too nice to say, this is a hot mess and you need to get rid of these first 3 chapters. You need that friend to do that. But ideally, you need editors, agents, publishers, slush pile readers. You need those people to give you some feedback on that stuff as well. You need beta readers to really critique it. When I hand somebody a beta reader one of my books, I don't want, hey, this is great. Well, that doesn't do me any good. I want you to tell me what's wrong with it. I want you and 3 or 4 other people to tell me what's wrong with it, so that 5 million potential readers out there are not telling me what's wrong with it. I think that's a big point, right? That makes sense. So there they are, the 11 rules of writing, Elmore Leonard. If you have not read Elmore Leonard, I don't know what's wrong with you. As you can tell, I read a lot of crime thriller books. He's a master. I also want to give a little shout out. There's my Pappy Van Winkle 15 year. And the only reason I have that bottle, it was about $4,000 to buy that bottle, is because of, as a kid reading Elmore Leonard books, he would have Pappy Van Winkle in there. And I thought, oh, he made that up. And then I realized, oh, that's a thing. And then by the time I was old enough to drink alcohol, it was a thing where it was very expensive. It was very limited. And it was a top shelf alcohol. So when I hit a big contract a few years ago, my wife's like, why don't you get yourself a bottle? I'm like, it's like $4,000. And I bought it. And it is the highest rated whiskey bourbon in the world. It was at the time when I bought it. And if you come to my house, I will give you a shot if you're a bourbon drinker, if you are a whiskey drinker. I've had a lot of people here like, I just really drink beer, but I'll try it. I'm like, I'm sure you will. That goes for like $250 a shot in a restaurant, if they even have it. So guess what? No, you're not getting it. All right. Go read some Elmore Leonard. If you are a fan of Elmore Leonard, let me know. If you've never read Elmore Leonard, but this has piqued your curiosity, if you're a writer and some of these rules, while they're all common sense, I've given you my takes on them. You might have a different take. I want to know. I want to know about all these things. I also want to thank you for subscribing. I also want to thank you for watching this and more of my videos. I always try every Wednesday and every Sunday. I do a brand new writing video. And so hopefully you get something out of this. Hopefully you have questions, comments, concerns. I want to hear them. And let's just keep doing this crazy journey we call writing together. And I'm always looking for new things to talk about as well. Like I said, Greg Sutter posted this this month, and I just wanted to put it out there, and I will tag the actual Substack, and also follow his Substack because he's got some really, really cool stuff on it as well. All right, people. I appreciate all of the support for not just me, but for all writers. I mean, we're all in this together.